What's that sound? It's For Amusement Only, the EM and Bingo Pinball Podcast.
Welcome back to For Amusement Only. This is Nick Baldridge. Have you ever wondered how an EM keeps track of what you're doing? How does it know that you're near the end of the sequence or that you've completed it in order to light special? Well, the answer is that there is typically a relay bank in the bottom of the cabinet. A relay is simply a bank of switches which all move at the same time. The modern equivalent is transistor logic. However, in an EM, transistors didn't exist. So what you have are several switches that move in unison and change state. So let's take a couple real-world examples here, and again, I'm going to pull from my games because I have limited imagination. But also because they're right beside me. So, on Pop-A-Card, one of the goals is to complete a bank of drop targets. When you do this, a relay trips that lights the WOW light for the added ball, and there are 3 different relays which do the same job, just for different parts of the playfield. On Mystery, which is a very sequence-driven game, there are 12 passive bumpers, not pops. They don't move the ball themselves. Each sequence of 4, and they're numbered 1 through 12, each group of 4, when hit, will light special in a different part of the playfield. There's a trip for each passive bumper, and by trip I mean trip relay, and there's a trip for completing the sequence. The sequence trip will move when it sees that all 4 of the previous trips have been moved. The sequence trip lights the special and allows the proper scoring to happen. On Twinkie, there's a trip that tells it that you're on your last ball, or that your game is over, or that you're on your first ball. And this is how it keeps track of where you are beyond the ball count. On Bounty, there's a bank of trips, each with its own special function. For example, there's a trip for lighting the yellow rollover to extend the time tree, one for lighting the red rollover to extend the time tree further, one for lighting OK, Super OK, and Extra OK, one for lighting the yellow supersection, one for lighting the red supersection, one for tilt, 2 for extra ball, and so forth. There are also trips that move in order to coordinate the time tree. So beyond the timer unit, which is a stepper, there are also trips which help to confirm or lock you out of certain features. Double Up has much the same as Bounty, but with a couple added trips. All 4 star zones for 300 and all 4 star zones for 600, as well as the special 3 in the star zone to start red letter and 2 in the star zone to start red letter. There are also special double score trips on Double Up, which are not present on Bounty. Bounty, however, has the super section, since it's a magic screen game, and it also has the 3 or 2 in the blue, score 3 or 600. So as you can see, when the complexity of the machine increases, so too do the number of relays needed in order to help with the logic. Today's tech is fairly simple. We're just going to talk about relays and how to adjust them what to do if the relay wants to trip all the time, and how to correct that. And what to do if the relay stays energized. So the first thing to understand is how the relay works. In a trip relay, it works by energizing a coil which pulls in an armature and drops the relay. Now the relay is comprised of a plastic or fiber yoke which pulls all the switches at the same time. So the trip trips and all the switches fall down. If you observe your game malfunctioning for some reason, try to trace it back to a relay. How do you know if a relay is working appropriately? Well, for a trip relay, observe the switch position in the reset position and then trip it. Use a piece of wood or something non-conductive if the machine's on, but typically, again, I'm a chicken and I try not to make changes to the machine while it's on because it's a good way to get shocked or cause damage to the machine. So, if your relay is tripping all the time and you can't figure out why, the number one culprit would be the lock-in switch that drives the coil. It's most likely caused by that switch being misadjusted. Observe the switches in their reset position and observe them in the trip position. Do all the switches change state? If they do, the next thing to do would be to check the switch tabs. As I mentioned on my mini switch tab episode, you want to check in the back and make sure no switch tabs are touching. If no switch tabs are touching, then you want to clean the switches, and after that you may have to readjust them again. So again, re-observe in the reset position, which is how they're drawn on the schematic, and in the trip position. Now I mention the schematics because if you are observing the switches and cannot tell just by observation whether they're normally open, normally closed, or single pole double throw, your schematic is your best friend. That said, it's usually 100% obvious what kind of relay you're looking at. Or I'm sorry, which kind of switch you're looking at. So another problem, which happens occasionally, is that the armature becomes magnetized. When this happens, it's incredibly irritating, especially if it's not a trip relay, but instead an actuated relay that happens because of action on the playfield or other player interaction. An example might be a relay that scores 10 points. Well, if you have an armature that's magnetized, it'll cause the score motor to revolve more than once and score more than 10 points. Another example that I'll take from my games is Double Up. The C relay, which is actuated by the player as long as the time tree hasn't locked you out, has become magnetized. And what this means is that it stays down after I've finished pushing the button. Well, that's not correct. It should be releasing. And I've had this happen on the A relay before, and it's incredibly frustrating because it prevents you from pushing either the A or the B button to switch the other numbers on the back glass, and instead only allows you to keep pushing C. Now you can keep pushing that to your heart's content, but it won't let you push the other ones until that armature finally lets go, whenever that is. Sometimes it's when a new game is started. So this is a problem that just developed tonight. And the way to fix it is to take the relay apart. And the relay is comprised of those switches, the holder that's either plastic or fiber that holds all the switches together, the metal armature, and a spring, and then a coil. The coil pulls in the armature and moves the switches. Now, once you take it apart, you want to remove the armature plate. Set it on the ground or a piece of wood, and then take a mallet and smack it. And you want to smack it several times. And you don't want to deform it. You just want to beat the magnet molecules out of it, basically. And then take a screw or other metal object that can be magnetized and run it by the plate. See if it catches. If it doesn't, the other thing that I'll do is rough up the end of the coil with a piece of fine-grained sandpaper. And this, again, it just kind of shakes up the molecules. I don't know if that part does anything really, but it prevents it from recurring for at least a time. Reassemble, and you should be good to go. But when you reassemble, you're going to have to make sure that it moves appropriately and everything is working. But once you do, it'll give you quite a long time of trouble-free operation. Now, here's a question I have to ask myself. This is the second relay in Double Up that has magnetized. And they're both behind the back box. Is there something that's not properly isolated that's allowing those armatures to become magnetized? Perhaps a piece of fish paper that sat between those relays and the metal back box behind the magic screen, or the mystic lines. So, those are the kind of things that I ask myself, and I'll figure it out next time I pull the game out from the wall, likely to change the fuse holders. And that should take care of it. Alright, well, thank you for joining me again. My name is Nick Baldridge. You can reach me at foramusementonlypodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online at foramusementonly.libsyn.com. And you can find us on Stitcher, iTunes, Pocket Casts, RSS, and on Facebook. Thanks again. Talk to you later.